Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here, and today you'll be exploring new planets, campaigning for political dominance, forming binding covenants, and using the might of your fleet, all while searching the cosmos for Gaia, the homeworld of an ancient creator race that will tip the balance of power. You'll be leading one of 5 starter races or creating your own unique player-made races as you struggle for galactic control. Quest for Gaia is a galactic empire-building game with a heavy focus on player interaction. It's for 1 to 5 players, ages 14 and up, takes 90 to 150 minutes to play, and is published by Open Door Games. It's on Kickstarter right now, so I'm going to show you how the game works, and I'll see you on the other side. Now this is a Kickstarter preview, so all the art and components you see here are subject to change, not final, prototype material, things like that. So you're going to want to check the link in the description below to go to the Kickstarter project page to see all the final art and components. Now here we have the main board set up here, and over the course of the game you're going to be trying to score 22 points. You can also play a shorter game at 14 or a longer game at 30, and there's many different ways to get points that I'll explain as we come up to them, and then I'll summarize those at the end of the video. Now at the beginning of the game, each player is going to get one of these starting races, and these essentially are going to give you an asymmetric, some powers, some abilities, some different things you start with, and things like that. Some of them actually have some limitations. There's actually some ways that you can create your own races as well, but we'll go over that at the end of the video. But just know that everyone's going to start with their own race. Now here we have sort of the tiles have been laid out in a setup here for 3 players, and they're set up in a somewhat orderly fashion, but there is some strategy as to where you lay them out. But here we have the 3 different players laid out. Each of them are going to have a starting planet and have 4 of their ships on there. Now when you control a planet, they're going to give you some materials and resources, in this case supply and metal, and those are essentially going to assist you in taking actions throughout the game that we'll go over in just a little bit. Now each player gets their own player board where they're going to track different things like how many actions they're taking, the different resources that they have, what they're doing with them, some credits, which essentially is money. You'll be using that board to track things throughout the game. Now each round of the game is played over 4 different phases. In the first round here, I'm just going to jump into the actions phase, which is where most of the game is played and you're doing all sorts of different actions. So we're going to go in that phase first and talk about all the different things you could do in the game, and then I'll talk about how that fits into the big cycle of how rounds work afterwards. Now the first player for that round is called the Chancellor. We'll talk about how that changes later, but that player is going to start and things are going to go clockwise, and each player is going to spend 1 action at a time. There's 2 types of actions you can take: a main action using this disc, or some minor actions using these little minor actions here on your board. So let's talk about all the major actions that you can take. Those are off on the main board. And those are on the left side of the main board here. So you can take this and you can go to Explore, for example, where you're going to explore a planet. Now once a main action cylinder goes here, it's blocked for all other players. Now when you do that Explore, you get to take 2 planets from this bag and you can decide which one that you'd like to place out. For example, like we could choose from these 2. Now these are planets that you'll place out, and if you control them, you'll get those resources like supplies and metal, or supplies and fuel, which will help you move around. Now over the course of the game, you'll also be upgrading planets. We'll show you how you do that later, but that will give you some better benefits. But you can look at these and see which one you want. The one that you don't take will get removed from the game. Now when you place this, you've got to place it within at least 2 hexes away from your starting world, or 2 away from any of the other planets that you control. And so let's say we place it somewhere like here. And sometimes the board might get full enough that you can't put it 2 away. In that case, you can kind of put it anywhere that's an empty hex. Now the B side of this, if you did this, does the same thing, but you just get 1 planet out of the bag. You don't get to choose from 2. Let's talk about research, which has to do with this part of the board. Now this research side of the board has different types of technologies. Every player will start on one of these depending on their race. And then as you move up, you can basically research into 2 technologies at the same time when you do this. And you'll see that there's different abilities. And as you go there, you have to pay a certain amount of credits. Everyone starts with 3 credits, but there's different ways to gain credits throughout the game. So if I was to go here, I would have to spend 4 credits to essentially get this ability as well. If you get all the way to the end of a track, you'll get some points. That's one of the main ways to score points in the game, is getting to the end of some of these research tracks. Now, as you move on these different tracks, you have to start on the first one on a specific technology, then you can spend to move up, and you have everything that you've gotten to and before it. And they do all sorts of different things, like as you imagine, defense does a lot of things about defending, and offense has to do with attacking, engines with moving, construction with getting materials and such. So all different tracks that you can go down. Feel free to pause the video here and look at what all these different abilities do. Now, the Espionage Action allows you to do one of two things. One is to copy a technology that another player has, and you do that at no cost, but you got to make sure you have a ship in a hex that's surrounding one of that player's planets, because you got to be close enough to espionage them. The other option when you go here is you can essentially just destroy one ship anywhere out on the board. Now, another main action you could take is the market. Now, in the market, you can place one of your resources in the right spot there, and you'll immediately get a certain amount of credits, like 2. Now, there is an upkeep phase I haven't gone over yet, but at the beginning of each round there is one, and you can gain more credits that way too. But other players can bump you down, where in this sense, they're getting the 2 and then you're getting 1. And if somebody else bumps them, this ends up going to your board sort of spent, because sometimes you can spend those resources to do different things. Another possible main action is to do Covenant. Now, these Covenant cards are right here, and so you would draw 2 of these, and you can do one or both of these. Now, what these do is that the color is important. This basically says that for the blue player, I would need, in order to get this 2 points, I would need to give my major action marker to the blue player, and they get to use it that round. Where this is like trade, I'd give this player, and in this case it's our color, purple, so we could give it to any other player, give them 3 credits, and if so, we'd give them 1 point. Now, important in this is the timing of this. If when you have these, if you play your major marker before fulfilling these, well, then you don't get the points, and you actually have to change your government. Now, each player starts with a certain government depending on their race for that game. Like this one, I could give 2 credits to a player and choose the same major action that they did this turn. That's pretty cool. But if you don't fulfill your Covenant cards before you use your major action, you have to go to Anarchy, which gives you 1 less minor action. We're going to go over the minor actions in just a moment, but that can affect how many things you can do throughout a turn. And speaking of governments, you can go to Revolt, and that major action allows you to change which government you are. And the last major action I haven't talked about yet is the Campaign. And it's the last one because it actually deals with a phase that we haven't talked about yet. It has to do with turn order. At the beginning of the game, each player has 2 of their own cards here shuffled in this deck. And at the beginning, before your actions phase, there's going to be a politics phase where a certain amount of cards are drawn, 7, and you're going to be able to essentially take all of the pawns that are your color and either give them to yourself or somebody else. Essentially, it's sort of like voting for who's going to be the chancellor, essentially going first that round. Well, not only do you get to go first in that phase, but the chancellor also gets 2 points right away. That's one way to score points in the game. However, when you go to that campaign action, you get to take another card from your deck and shuffle it into here, which gives you more chances and more votes to be able to affect the chancellor. And there's actually cards that will give you a lot more, like this one will give me 3 of mine, or this one will give me a whole ton of mine. And there's always a couple of cards in there that are confusion cards that are basically don't do anything. Now, we started this whole section by saying this is part of the action phase, and one of the things you could do is take a major action, which is what we did. Well, another thing you could do is just not put this on the main board, but basically just put it off to the side and take 2 minor actions. The minor actions are the ones you see on your board: attack, upgrade, move, and build. Now, if you take the build action, you can basically build a ship, a normal fighter ship, which is the cubes. You can always do 1, but you can do an additional 1 for each metal that you have here. Now, metal, most people start with this like this, but sometimes you'll be using this resource for something else, and you might spend it. If it's not spent and it's here, essentially, in this case, I could have created 2 fighter ships on my home territory. So I could have placed 2 there on my home planet. Now, there's other times you can put planets out there that will allow you to put ships on them as well. Now, when you're building, you always get that 1, but if you had 2 metal to spend, you could actually build a carrier. And that would go there, and this carrier can hold up to 3 ships, and that's important because one of the minor actions is to move. You always get 1 move, but if you have fuel here, you'll get 1 more move for each fuel you have there, up to a maximum of 3 of those. Now, let's just say we had 3 moves. Now, moving this carrier is great because we have 3 ships on there. We can drop them off as we move. So we could be like, go like here and drop 1, and then go here for our second move and drop another 1. Maybe we drop 2 there, and then we move here. Now, this is interesting. These are different types of places on the board, different hexes, where if you land on one of these star spots and you're there at the end of the round, you'll get a bonus. For example, we were on the green one. We can only do this once per game there, but we would get 3 credits for that. Now if you get this one, you get one of these crystals, and this is really cool because crystals basically act as wild as 2 of any of the resources, but then they get spent. But at any time, you can spend 4 credits to get one of those crystals. This allows you to place 2 ships out onto the board, and they essentially go in any spot you already have ships. This one allows you to move up 1 on that technology track we showed you earlier, and this one will get you a point. Now if you are able to have ships on 3 different star charts, and assuming you held those for the end of the round and you got those bonuses, you now have 3 star charts found. This allows you to triangulate Gaia's position. Now Gaia goes onto this center spot here, and it acts as a planet, but only players that have at least 3 star charts found are able to attack ships that are on here, and this gives a great benefit. It gives you a crystal during the upkeep phase, which is great, and it gives you another major action. Another minor action you can do, speaking of attack, is attacking, and essentially you are attacking ships in the same hex as you, and if you have more ships, you do 2 damage, and if you have less, it does 1 damage. For example, if we were the attackers, they would lose 2, which is this, and we would lose 1, which is this, but we still control that planet. And it's another way to gain points, because if the attacking player did more damage, and they win the combat and receive a point. And of course, points are tracked on this scoreboard. And when attacking, you cannot attack another player's homeworld. Now the last possible minor action is to upgrade. Essentially, you'd spend 3 credits to upgrade and flip one of the planets you control. And upgrading does do some cool things, like we used to just get a supply and a fuel, and now you'd be getting 2 supplies of fuel and an additional minor action, for example, assuming that you're controlling that planet. Now when it's your turn in this action phase, again, you can use this to take a major action. You can sort of just discard it to take any 2 consecutive minor actions that we just showed. Or instead, you can actually just move this down to do a minor action. Or if you have more than that, you could go it down and do like 2 consecutive minor actions. And that would sort of be your turn in that action phase, and it keeps going in clockwise order until all players are done with their actions. After the action phase is over, you go to the end phase. Now this is important. There's some discovery offers here. There's some cards, and there's enough cards here, 1 per player. Now whoever was the Chancellor who got to go first actually is going to go last. So sometimes it's sort of a trade-off there. So the player who went last will get first choice, and so on and so forth. And they can choose one of the cards that's there. And these do cool things, like this one allows you to discover that star chart and get the bonus. This one is a minor action, allows you to spend a supply to get those crystals, which as you know is wild and can be used as 2 of any supplies. Or this one's immediately gain the next level of construction for no cost. With construction, of course, being that level of technology there. Now some of these discovery cards actually have some encounters. They're red backs like this, and they come with these miniatures. And when you select one of these, the player to your left puts it in one of the hexes that you have ships in. And essentially, this is going to do damage immediately, and it's going to do damage at every end phase. So 3 hits. It's going to deal damage to you right there. And if you're not there, it'll go to your adjacent places. It has a certain amount of health, which would be tracked by cubes. But if you defeat it, it'll give you a certain amount of points. And there's certain special abilities, like damage dealt to this is reduced by 2. This one actually gives you an extra crystal each upkeep if it's in a hex of your color. So then other players are going to want to come maybe take this out. They'll get the point, and then you won't be getting that crystal. So there's a lot of different encounters as well. And then there's some like this that just do certain things, like slide beneath a planet you control, and you can keep this card and place it anytime in a limit of 1 per planet. Also in the end phase, players are going to check their ship supplies. You always keep 4 ships, but for each that you have of these supplies, you can keep 4 more ships. So depending on how many you have, you might have to take some ships off the board. Plus, you'd have to take away ships that are at least 2 away from either your homeworld or carriers. So that's another good reason to bring carriers out, is they allow you to spread out a little bit more. And also in the end phase, you would get a point for some of the spots that you control that say so. And during this end phase is when you would actually collect the bonuses that I discussed earlier about those star charts. Now at the beginning of each round, it goes to an upkeep phase where you're going to make sure you have the certain right amount of tokens depending on which planets you control and if they're upgraded or not. You just make sure you have all your resources correct. And again, the marketplace could actually give you some resources at this point too. Also, each player is going to refresh their actions, their major and their minor. Usually you start on 2 for your minor, but one of the abilities of this race is sickly, which means you actually get one less minor action, which makes it a little bit harder to do the minor actions, but it has some other abilities that are good for you. And that race starts in biology. If you get all the way to the end, you can ignore one of your traits and gain one of those, so you can actually get rid of that sickly if you get there. And at the end of the round, anyone has gotten past the points of the length of game you're playing, then the game would end and that player with the most is going to win. And remember, there's many ways to score, like being, during the politics phase, being the chancellor going to first gets you 2 points. Completing any third level is going to get you 3 points. Finishing some of these covenant cards are going to get you a certain amount of points. Completing or some of these encounters is going to get you a certain amount of points. And don't forget about winning attacks and holding spots on the board as well. Now, in addition to the starter races, it comes with a booklet on how to create your own races. So you'll get some of these, and you'll be able to basically come up with the race's name, the picture, sort of the backstory, things like that. And you'll begin with 5 race points. And you'll be spending those points on different things, like choosing a starting government, where some of them are positive, some of them are negative, some of them are 0. You'll choose a starting technology of any of them. You'll choose any 4 racial traits. And so they cost a certain amount like that. Now these ones are cost, -4 and -5 for these ones. And ones that cost less, essentially minusing from your total of 5 that you started with, they aren't as powerful, of course. And you can take one racial trait that's bad for you, but it gives you some more points to spend elsewhere. Well, there you have Quest for Gaia, and as I showed in the overview, it's a full 4X experience, explore, expand, exploit, and exterminate that allows you to not only get playing quickly with predetermined races, which give the game an asymmetric feeling, but also the ability to create your own race to play. Now, if you'd like to see the final art and components and all the different pledge levels available, you can click the link below me in the description of this video, and it will take you directly to the Kickstarter project page, and I'm sure that Open Door Games would love your support.